So here now are Nikki, Giovanni, and James Baldwin in conversation.
Jimmy, I'm really curious. Why did you move to Europe?
Well, why or when?
Why? I think I know when.
I moved to Europe insofar as one can say I did. I moved to Europe first in 1948 because I was trying to become a writer and couldn't find in my surroundings, in my country, a certain stamina, a certain corroboration that I needed. For example, no one ever told me that Alexander Dumas was a mulatto, and no one had told me that Pushkin was black. And as far as I knew when I was just very, very young, there had never been anything, as far as my father knew, which is much more important, there had never been anything called a black writer. You know.
Can dig it. There still isn't.
So when I was 24, I split. I came to Paris and worked and went home in 57 and worked and stayed and was based in New York, really, in and out, because work is on the one hand making speeches and on the other hand trying to write, you know. And I never was able to write in New York, so I would go out and do my work and come back and do my work, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I understand.
And that all ended in a way, or something else began, after Martin Luther King was murdered. And I spent a long time in limbo. And at the moment I'm based in the south of France, but there isn't any way ever to leave America. You know, I would be a fool to think that there was someplace I could go where I wouldn't carry myself with me, or there was some way for me to live if I pretended I didn't have the responsibilities which in fact I do have. So I'm, in a way, just living. I'm a cat trying to make it in the world, because I'm condemned to live in the world.
Condemned?
Condemned in the sense that when you're young and also when you're old, you would rather, have around you, the expected things, to know where everything is, and it's a little difficult, but it's very valuable to be forced to move one place to another and deal with another set of situations all of the time, and to accept that this is going to be, it is your life, and to use it, It means you, in a sense, become neither white nor black, and you learn a great deal about, you're forced to learn a great deal about the history out of which all these words and conceptions and flags and martyrdoms
Right.
come.
Yeah. There's something that eventually I'm sure we're going to hit, so we're just going to have to work it out.
All right.
Okay, but let's start, let's say, with Everybody's Protest novel, which I think came out in 48.
It came out in 49, something like that,
Yeah.
yes.
When I was 6.
Oh, Jesus.
I thought it was a magnificent piece. As I went to first grade, I said, my God, somebody's really talking. How do you stand in relationship, say, to that novel now?
To that, to Everybody's Protest novel, that essay now.
Yeah. What do you think about, let's say, the younger writers, of which I'm one? And within that context, are we, in your opinion, moving ahead? Are we moving out of that basic set of assumptions?
Oh, I think it's very difficult for me to say it, because it can be misunderstood. But you have no idea, and I can never express to you to what extent I depend on you, or I mean you, Nikki, Giovanni, and also your generation.
My generation, yeah.
I can even say you have no idea, and I can never express that either, because in a way I have no right to say it, but I'm very proud of you. Something has moved, things move in a very strange way, and maybe inexpressible. If I wrote that essay today, for example, I would be writing a very different essay out of a very different kind of problem. I think that without quite realizing it, and no matter what our hang-ups are as of this very moment, the hang-up of my generation or the hang-up of your generation, and the terrible situation in which all of us find ourselves, one thing has changed, and that is the attitude that black people have toward themselves. Now, within that change, I don't want to be romantic about it, a great deal of confusion and incoherence, will go on for a very long time, But that was inevitable. That moment had to come too, And everybody's put us now, well, I was trying for myself, after all, first of all, to elucidate for myself a theology and the effects of a theology, which I, at that moment, realized I carried in myself. It was not the world that was my oppressor only. Because what the world does to you, if the world does it to you long enough and effectively enough, you begin to do it to yourself. You become a collaborator, an accomplice of your own murderers, because you believe the same things they do. They think it's important to be white, and you think it's important to be white. They think it is shameful to be black, and you think it is shameful to be black. And you have no corroboration around you of any other sense of life. All those corroborations which are around you are, in terms of the white majority standards, so deplorable, they frighten you to death. You don't eat watermelon. You get so rigid you can't dance. You can hardly move by the time you're 14. You're always scrubbed and shining. A parody of God knows what, because no white person's ever been, as clean as you have been forced to become. And you got somehow to begin to break out of all of that and try to become yourself. It's hard for anybody, but it's very hard if you're born black in a white society. Hard because you've got to divorce yourself from the standards of that society. The danger of your generation, if I may say so, we will pursue this length if you like,
Go on.
is to substitute one romanticism for another. Because in fact, these categories are, to put it too simply, but with a certain brutal truth, these categories are commercial categories.
It's true.
There was a reason that when you and I were slaves, my son, produced out of your body, was by definition a slave. But the master's son also produced out of your body, depending on his color. If he was light enough, he could live in the big house. And if he wasn't, he took his condition from the condition of his mother.
He was still a slave.
He was a slave. He was a slave. He was a slave because even though he might be the master's son, the master could make money off of his son. The whole institution was threatened if a slave woman could produce a free man.
Of course.
And the dilemma begins there. Do you see what I mean?
I don't see why it's a dilemma. If a
The
slave
dilemma
woman can
began
produce a
there.
free man, that,
A slave woman was forbidden
that
by,
means anything.
a slave woman was forbidden by law. I said the reasons are commercial, to produce a free man, because once you have a free man out of the body of a slave, you no longer have a slave.
That's true.
But it's very hard to recognize that the standards which have almost killed you are really mercantile standards. They're based on cotton, they're based on oil, they're based on peanuts, they're based on profits.
Yeah, to this day.
To this hour.
Yeah.
Which the church sanctifies.
But the church is commercial.
It's when you begin to realize all of that, which is not easy, that you begin to break out of the culture which has produced you and discover the culture which really produced you. If you see what I mean?
Yeah.
What really brought you where you are. When you're in trouble, when I'm in trouble, I do not sing a Doris Day Tin Pan Alley tune. You find yourself humming and moaning, something which
But that
your
has nothing to do with the church.
great-grandfathers did. No.
That has to do with us.
That has to do with us.
Yeah.
And what it's all about is the attempt now to excavate something which has been buried. Which you contain and I contain, and which your kid contains, and which has got to carry, which one has a hand down the line for the sake of your kid and for the sake of future generations, and even for the sake of white people who have not the remotest idea what this means. Because we have the edge over the people who think of themselves as white, and that we have never been deluded into believing what they believe. And that sounds like a contradiction.
Yeah.
But in fact, you watch the man you work for. You have to watch him. You don't know you're watching him.
You watch them.
You're watching him. But he's not watching you. He thinks he knows who you are or what you are. You don't know who he is because your life is in his hands. And you have to watch him, because if you don't watch him, you might have lived from Monday till Tuesday. It's as simple as that. And without knowing you know him, you know him. He can't fool you.
I'm not at all. I mean, the civil rights movement, I came up in the 60s, which is like way after everybody else. But we always assumed that we knew white people. You know what I mean? That we really sort of like understood them. And I found out that if you don't understand yourself, you don't understand anybody else. And all you know what I mean with the snake is to watch a snake. And you know it's a snake, but you don't know it.
That's right. That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
Because there's too much between, there's too much emotion.
There's too much
You know
fear.
what I mean? I can watch like the cat I work for, you know what I mean? And he's going to watch me to some extent. But we know each other. I would hypothesize that he knows me better because his game is running, mine's not. And that's what I've sort of always disagreed with your generation on. As long as his game is running, he obviously knows me because I'm playing. You understand? He said jump and I'm saying how high.
Yeah.
He knows me.
You may be right, but I would put it another way. I would suggest that since his game is running, he hasn't got to know you. Because his game is running. No, you're part of the game he's running. He hasn't got to know you. I would think that one of the reasons that the Americans are in such trouble now is because the game is running. It was running up until only yesterday, really.
What you believe today?
You know, and all of a sudden, through the American astonishment, the Americans have suddenly discovered that people in the world don't like them.
Yeah.
Now, I always knew that, because I didn't like them. You know, I love some.
They're not likable. Well, there's two people that are
they ain't likable.
And there's two people in the world that's not likable, a master and a slave.
Exactly.
You see?
Exactly. You know, we will never get precise categories for that very loaded statement. You know, but that is where the truth is.
Yeah. How did you like them? So the question, I mean, for me, the question has always been power.
Yes.
And for, like you all, the question has been morals. You know, I never wanted to be the most moral person in the world.
I agree. I know.
I would sell my soul. You know what I mean? What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? The world. You know what I mean? The world, that's what it profits.
I know.
So you take the soul, you know. We used to sing that spiritual. Take the world, but give me Jesus.
Yes,
Y'all can have Jesus.
Yes.
Give me the world. You know, even though it's losing 25% of its energy every 100 years or something ridiculous.
Oh, please, don't believe don't believe everything you hear.
No, but I'm saying that's not my concern, you know?
I know.
Even though it's polluted, ugly, dirty, give it to me.
Speaking,
or or I will take it or not.
But speaking, I agree with you. I agree with you. But speaking for myself, but also speaking as representative of my generation. But it's probably safer to speak only for myself, really. You know, I know that in my own case, what I felt and still feel, perhaps in a different way, but what I felt very strongly in the years, for example, when we all were marching down those dusty highways with Martin. Look, I left the church when I was 17 years old, you know, and I've not really been to a church since, except, you know, when I had to go for various fundraising rallies or this or that. And I was not exactly the kind of Christian that Martin was, if I could be described as a Christian at all.
It's hard to be the kind of Christian he was.
But I liked him. I loved him, in fact. And I knew that something was happening through him. And my concern was, yes, the world. But I'd seen what white people had done to the world. And I'd seen what white people had done to their children. You know, because in gaining the world, they had lost something.
A lot.
No, they'd lost the ability to love their own children.
Or the ability to love themselves.
Which is the same thing, you know. And I didn't want that to happen, if I may say so, to you. It was not a matter of morals so much as a matter of being forced in my own case to keep suggesting that though it was indeed, you know, a matter of power without, the word morals is misleading. Power without some sense of oneself is simply another kind of sterility. And the black people would then become exactly what white people have become. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a danger.
You know, I also accept this, that danger is not up to me to tell anybody how to run. You know, I can only speak as what I am. I'm a kind of poet, And if I'm a kind of poet, then I'm responsible from my own point of view to the people who produced me and the people who will come after me. You know, so that when the Holocaust comes, and it will come, you know, eventually, no matter how simple black and white terms may be today, life is not that simple. And sooner or later, if I do my work as I should do it, when I'm needed, I'll be there. You know what I mean?
I don't know if the people listening, I know what you mean. Because I think the most important thing for any of us is when what comes, or when what we know will come comes, that we have the strength to say, yeah, it came.
That's right, it came.
You know,
It came.
and I'm going to stay in my apartment on 94th and you'll be in Nice, but we'll say, yeah.
And we'll also be able to ride out the storm, but what is more important is not so much riding out of the storm for you, Nikki, or me, Jimmy, you know. But in my mind's eye, there's always that kid. He's going to be here when you're gone.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Hopefully.
and when I am long gone. And from my point of view, it is about the children. It is about the children. We have to give the children something which in a way was after all given to us, though we had to learn how to translate it. Because your kid will be moving in a very different world than the one in which I grew up, which you won't know anything about at all, or the world in which you grew up, which will be remote for him, and yet he comes out of it and has got to carry it much further than you or I will be able to carry it.
He's got to have respect for it, but not be trapped by it.
Precisely. You have to both give it to him and liberate him from it.
Yes.
You know.
And I think that kind of thing has been lacking. Like, I think one of the nicest things that we created almost as a generation, and it wasn't us because Martin Delaney and those people were way before us, but just the fact that we could say, hey, I don't like white people.
It's a great liberation.
It was a beginning of course, being able to like them.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
which of course it upsets them, but that's their problem.
Yeah, but their problem really is a kind of, we were talking earlier before the show began about the kind of incomprehension on somebody's face, and you're trying to describe what is to you a very simple situation.
Right.
You know, like people don't like going to jail. And you see the man's face, and he looks astonished. What? People don't like going to jail? And then you pull back.
You mean so?
You know, does that really go on? And you live with this all your life. And what you watch is that he knows it, really. He doesn't think that you know it. He doesn't think anybody will tell him. And if it comes in, as we were saying earlier, if he allows that to enter into his guts, he's a very different person. He may explode. He doesn't know what will happen if he allows this apprehension of someone else's experience to enter into him.
Right. Because he's perpetuating his experience.
And this is the crisis of the age. This is what Malcolm really meant when he said that white is a state of mind.
Okay.
You know.
I won't argue that. On a certain level, because I tend to be parochial, one thing, and I tend to care about Afro-Americans, which I would define as the sons and daughters of slaves and slave owners. You know what I mean? I have.
That doesn't, by the way, sound very parochial to me.
It's very parochial because I don't care about my third world brothers and sisters and things like that I'm sure I should. But as we...
You mean you're responsible for a certain situation?
I just can't deal with it.
Yes, I
think that if everybody dealt with their own little situation,
Yes.
if I deal with my block and you deal with your block, we'll have two good...
And Malcolm said that too.
Yeah. So when we deal with white as being like a state of... Well, Malcolm said everything, which I would grant.
Really?
He encompassed. But as we begin to try to deal, you know what I mean, with the world, we find that a lot of things break down. And we find that frequently a white face goes with a white mind. Occasionally, a black face goes with a white mind. Very seldom, a white face will have a black mind. But we find the frequent situation is a white face has a white mind.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean? So for the few mistakes that you would make, it's unfortunate.
No, I know.
You know,
I wouldn't.
To me, it's unfortunate.
I wouldn't argue that at all.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't argue that at all. No, it doesn't make any difference to me. As I said once somewhere, you know, that a cop is a cop.
Well, cops are white.
And you know, and he may be a very nice man, but I haven't got the time to figure that out. You know, all I know is he's got a uniform and a gun. You know, and I have to relate to him that way. You know, that's the only way to relate to him at all. Because one of us may have to die.
One of us, in New York.